My phone buzzes against the bar counter where I'm wiping down glasses for the third time tonight. The sound cuts through the low hum of conversation and clinking bottles that has become the soundtrack of my life. I glance down, already knowing what I'll see. The same two words that have appeared on my screen every few weeks for over a year now. Chair free. From Lionel. I pause mid-wipe, the damp cloth still in my hand, and stare at the message. There's nothing unusual about it. Nothing that should make my chest tighten the way it does. He's my barber. I need a haircut. This is how it works between us. Simple, efficient, predictable. He texts when he has time. I show up. We fall into our familiar routine of careful small talk and comfortable silences while his hands work through my hair with the same steady precision I've come to depend on. But tonight feels different somehow. Maybe it's because I've been putting off this appointment longer than usual, letting my hair grow shaggy around my ears until even the other bartenders started making jokes about it. Maybe it's because I've been restless lately, feeling like I'm drifting through days that blur together in a haze of late shifts and early mornings. Or maybe it's something else entirely, something I don't want to name. I text back that I'll be there in 20 minutes and finish my closing duties with mechanical efficiency. The familiar motions of counting tips, stacking chairs, and switching off lights feel more automatic than usual tonight. My mind is already elsewhere, walking the 6 blocks to Lionel's shop, pushing through the door with its cheerful bell, settling into the worn leather chair that has molded itself to the shape of dozens of customers over the years. The October air is crisp against my face as I make my way through the quiet streets. This part of town shuts down early. Small businesses that close at 5, restaurants that dim their lights by 9. Lionel's shop is one of the few places that stays open late, a beacon of warm yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk. I can see him moving around inside, cleaning his station, preparing for what he assumes will be just another routine appointment. The bell announces my arrival with its familiar chime. Lionel looks up from where he's organizing his tools, and something passes across his face, a flicker of expression I can't quite read. He nods toward the chair without his usual greeting, and I notice his movements seem more deliberate than normal as he shakes out the black cape and snaps it in the air. I settle into the chair, feeling the leather creak beneath me. This is the part where we usually exchange pleasantries about my week, where he asks about work and I complain about difficult customers or late tips. This is where he tilts his head and studies my hair from different angles, running his fingers through it to assess how much needs to come off. This is where the comfortable routine begins. But tonight, Lionel doesn't reach for his clippers. Instead, he moves to stand directly in front of me, closer than he's ever stood before. His hand comes up to my jaw, not to check the length of my sideburns or to angle my head for a better view, but to cup my face with a gentleness that makes my breath catch. His thumb brushes across my cheekbone as he turns my face toward him, and I find myself looking directly into his eyes instead of at our reflection in the mirror. There's something intense in his gaze, something that makes the air between us feel charged with electricity. I want to ask what he's doing, want to break the silence that has settled over us like a heavy blanket, but I can't seem to find my voice. And then, before I can process what's happening, Lionel leans forward and kisses me. It's not hesitant or questioning. It's deliberate, sure, as if he's been thinking about this moment for longer than I could have imagined. His lips are warm and soft against mine, and the kiss is brief, but it burns through me like lightning. My hands grip the armrests of the chair so tightly I can feel the leather giving way beneath my fingers. My heart pounds so hard I'm certain he can hear it in the quiet of the shop. When he pulls back, I'm frozen. My lips still tingling from the contact, my mind struggling to catch up with what just happened. Lionel looks at me for one more moment, his eyes searching my face for something, surprise, anger, reciprocation, but I'm too stunned to give him any reaction at all. Then, as if nothing has changed, as if the last 30 seconds never happened, he reaches for his clippers. The familiar electric hum fills the air as he switches them on, and he positions himself behind me with the same professional ease he's shown 100 times before. I watch his reflection in the mirror as he begins to work, his face composed and focused, giving no indication that anything unusual has occurred. but my body betrays me. Every brush of his fingers against my scalp sends shockwaves through me. Every time his wrist grazes my neck, I have to fight the urge to lean into the touch. The sound of the clippers, usually so soothing, now seems deafeningly loud in my ears. I try to control my breathing, try to appear normal, but I feel like I'm coming apart at the seams. I study his reflection, searching for some sign that he's as affected as I am. But Lionel works with the same steady concentration he always has, trimming around my ears with meticulous care, brushing away the small hairs that collect on my shoulders. He doesn't meet my eyes in the mirror. He doesn't acknowledge what just happened with even the slightest change in his demeanor. 20 minutes pass like hours. When he finally switches off the clippers and brushes the loose hair from my neck, I expect him to say something, anything, to address the moment that has rewired something fundamental between us. Instead, he simply removes the cape and shakes it out, same as always. I stand on unsteady legs and reach for my wallet, but my hands are trembling slightly as I pull out the bills. When I hand him the money, our fingers brush for just an instant, and I swear I see something flicker in his expression. But then it's gone, replaced by his usual polite smile. He walks me to the door and holds it open, the bell chiming its cheerful goodbye. The cool night air hits my face like a physical shock after the warmth of the shop. "Thank you," he says, his voice exactly as it's always been. "See you next time." I nod because I don't trust myself to speak, and I walk away on legs that feel disconnected from my body. But I can feel him watching me through the window until I turn the corner and disappear from view. The walk home passes in a blur of streetlights and empty sidewalks. My reflection catches my eye in storefront windows as I pass. The haircut looks perfect, as always. Professional, clean, exactly what I asked for. But underneath the familiar exterior, everything has shifted. That kiss, brief as it was, has left me completely undone. By the time I reach my apartment, one question is playing on repeat in my mind, drowning out everything else. What happens now? I should probably explain how I ended up in that chair in the first place. How a simple haircut became the axis around which my entire world would turn. My name is Caleb, and at 24, I've mastered the art of existing in the spaces between things. Between shifts at the bar where I work nights, pouring drinks for people who tip in crumpled singles and tell me their problems like I'm their therapist. Between paychecks that barely cover rent on a studio apartment where the radiator clanks all night and the neighbor upstairs plays music until 3 in the morning. Between relationships that never quite solidify into anything real, just bodies moving through the same motions, pretending that physical proximity equals emotional connection. I tell myself I like the flexibility of it all. The way bartending lets me sleep until noon. The way I can pick up extra shifts when I need money for groceries or to fix my car when it inevitably breaks down. The way I can disappear into the rhythm of making drinks, wiping down surfaces, listening to other people's stories instead of examining my own too closely. But if I'm being honest, which I'm trying to be more often these days, the transience has started to feel less like freedom and more like running in place. My apartment reflects this philosophy of temporary existence. Milk crates for furniture, a mattress on the floor, clothes hanging from a tension rod stretched across one corner because I never bothered to buy a proper dresser. The only permanent fixture is a glass jar on the kitchen counter where I stuff my tips at the end of each shift, crumpled bills that represent the possibility of something more stable someday when I figure out what that might look like. Most mornings I wake up feeling like I'm wearing yesterday's life like an ill-fitting coat, wondering when I'll find something that actually belongs to me. That's the headspace I was in when I first discovered Lionel's shop, over a year ago. I've been getting my hair cut at one of those chain places where they rush you through in 15 minutes and the stylist changes every visit. But the last time I went, the woman cutting my hair was clearly having an off day, and I left looking like I'd stuck my finger in an electrical socket. My coworker Marcus took one look at me and scribbled an address on a cocktail napkin. "Try this guy," he said. "He's good. Takes his time." Lionel's shop sits on a corner between a used bookstore and a deli that makes the best sandwiches in the city. From the outside, it looks unremarkable. Just a narrow storefront with a red and white barber pole that actually spins like something from a different era. But when I pushed through the door that first time, I felt something shift in my chest. The space was warm and inviting in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Old-fashioned barber chairs upholstered in deep green leather. Vintage mirrors with ornate frames. The kind of place that felt like it had been there forever, like it would outlast all of us. Lionel was 26 then, though I wouldn't learn his age until much later. What struck me immediately was how he carried himself, with a quiet confidence that seemed rooted in something deeper than mere professionalism. He moved through his space like he belonged there completely, like the shop was an extension of himself rather than just a place he worked. Where I felt constantly unmoored, Lionel seemed anchored. Where I drifted between temporary things, he had built something that mattered. His hands were steady as he worked, never hurried, never careless. He asked questions about what I wanted and actually listened to the answers. When he was finished, I looked in the mirror and saw a version of myself that seemed more intentional, more present. But it wasn't just the haircut that kept me coming back. It was the way our conversations developed over time, growing from polite small talk to something approaching genuine connection. Lionel never seemed judgmental when I told him about my latest workplace drama or the string of dates that had gone nowhere. He would nod thoughtfully while he worked, offering observations that were both kind and surprisingly insightful. "You're looking for something," he said once, trimming around my ears with surgical precision. "You just haven't figured out what it is yet." He was right, though I couldn't have articulated it then. I was searching for something to hold onto, something that felt real and lasting in a life that seemed designed around impermanence. Without realizing it, these appointments had become my anchor point, the one constant in a schedule that otherwise shifted like sand. Every few weeks, the same ritual. The text message, the walk to his shop, the comfortable weight of routine settling around us like a familiar blanket. Lionel would ask about work. I would complain about difficult customers or late nights. He would tease me gently about showing up hungover. I would make jokes about his meticulous attention to detail. There was an ease between us that I had learned not to question, a friendship that felt both casual and oddly intimate. But friendship was all I allowed myself to call it, even when I started noticing things that had nothing to do with his skills as a barber. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his forearms looked when he rolled up his sleeves, the careful attention he paid not just to cutting my hair, but to making sure I felt comfortable, seen, valued in a way that extended beyond the transaction. I told myself these observations were meaningless, just the natural result of spending time with someone whose job required them to focus entirely on you for an hour. I convinced myself that the warmth I felt in his presence was simply gratitude for good service, nothing more complicated than that. Until the night he kissed me, and every careful boundary I had constructed came crashing down. In the days following the kiss, I construct elaborate scenarios in my mind. Lionel will text an apology, explain that he was tired or stressed or momentarily confused about boundaries. Or maybe he won't text at all, and our comfortable routine will simply dissolve into the awkward silence that follows when people cross lines they can't uncross. I prepare myself for distance, for the loss of something that had become more important to me than I'd been willing to admit. But 3 weeks later, my phone buzzes with the same message it always has. Chair free. I stare at the text for a full minute, sitting on the edge of my unmade bed in the afternoon light, filtering through my one window. There's no acknowledgement of what happened, no explanation or qualification. Just those two words that have become a kind of code between us, an invitation back into a space that now feels charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. I should probably ignore it. The smart thing would be to find a new barber, to avoid the complications that are clearly brewing beneath the surface of what I thought was a simple friendship. But even as this rational voice speaks in my head, my fingers are already typing back that I'll be there in half an hour. Because the truth is, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. The kiss replays in my mind at random moments, while I'm mixing drinks, walking to work, lying in bed, unable to sleep. Not just the physical sensation, though that was electric enough, but the deliberateness of it. The way Lionel looked at me beforehand, like he was making a choice he'd been considering for a long time. When I arrive at the shop, everything appears exactly as it always has. The same warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, the same cheerful bell announcing my entrance. Lionel looks up from his station with what seems like genuine pleasure, as if seeing me is the best part of his day. But there's something different in his eyes now, a new awareness that makes the air between us feel dense with unspoken possibilities. The routine begins as it always does. I settle into the familiar chair, and he shakes out the black cape with practiced efficiency. But when his hands touch my shoulders to adjust the cape around my neck, the contact sends electricity shooting down my spine. When he runs his fingers through my hair to assess what needs to be done, I have to grip the armrest to keep from leaning into his touch. Every moment of contact feels amplified, loaded with meaning. The brush of his wrist against my ear as he works around the edges. The way his fingertips graze my scalp when he's checking the length on top. What used to feel professional now feels intimate in a way that makes my heart race and my breathing shallow. We talk, but the conversation has a different quality now. There are pauses that stretch a beat too long, moments where our eyes meet in the mirror and hold for just an instant before one of us looks away. The easy banter we use to share feels layered with subtext, as if we're having two conversations simultaneously, the surface one about work and weather, and the deeper one about what's happening between us. When he's finished with the cut, Lionel doesn't immediately remove the cape as he usually does. Instead, he stands behind me, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders, and we look at each other's reflection in the mirror. The moment stretches between us like a held breath. "You hungry?" he asks, and something in his tone makes it clear this isn't a casual question. I nod, not trusting my voice to remain steady. He locks up the shop while I wait on the sidewalk, watching him move through the familiar ritual of turning off lights and setting the alarm. When he emerges, there's something different about his posture, a looseness that suggests he's shed some invisible weight he'd been carrying. We walk to the Chinese place 2 blocks away, the same restaurant I've passed hundreds of times but never entered. Lionel orders for both of us with the confidence of someone who knows the menu by heart, and we carry the warm containers back to his shop. He unlocks the door and flicks on just the front lights, leaving the back of the space in shadow. We sit in the waiting area, eating lo mein from paper containers while the neon open sign hums above us in the window. It should feel strange, eating takeout in a barber shop after hours, but instead it feels remarkably natural. Like this is exactly where we're supposed to be. The conversation flows more easily now, away from the charged atmosphere of the chair and cape. Lionel tells me about how he came to own the shop, inheriting it from his uncle who taught him the trade. I find myself sharing things I usually keep private, my uncertainty about what I want from life, the way I sometimes feel like I'm sleepwalking through my days. When we finish eating, neither of us makes a move to leave. We sit in the soft light from the street, surrounded by the tools of his trade, and I realize this feels more like a date than anything I've experienced in months. Not because of any grand romantic gestures, but because of the attention we're paying to each other, the way the space between us seems to crackle with potential. "You don't have to answer this," Lionel says eventually, his voice quieter than usual. "But that night, when I kissed you, did I misread something?" I look at him across the small space between our chairs, this man who has become such a steady presence in my life, and I know I'm standing at the edge of something that will change everything. "No," I tell him, "you didn't misread anything." The relief that crosses his face is so visible it takes my breath away. After that conversation, something fundamental shifts between us, though the change happens so gradually I almost don't notice it at first. It's in the way Lionel's hands linger a fraction longer when he adjusts the cape around my shoulders, and how he takes his time sectioning my hair, his fingers moving through it with a deliberateness that feels less like efficiency and more like exploration. What used to be a 45-minute appointment stretches to an hour, then longer, as if neither of us wants the ritual to end. I find myself booking appointments more frequently, fabricating reasons why my hair needs attention when any reasonable person would say it looks fine. The excuses feel transparent even to me, claiming my sideburns are uneven when they're perfectly straight, insisting the back needs touching up when it was just cut 2 weeks ago. But Lionel never questions these invented needs. Instead, he welcomes me with that same warm smile and gives my hair the same meticulous attention he'd give to someone who genuinely required a full cut. During these extended sessions, our conversations deepen in ways that catch me off guard. The polite small talk we used to exchange gives way to something more substantial. I tell him about the restlessness that keeps me awake at night, how I feel like I'm sleepwalking through a life that belongs to someone else, about the way bartending has become less about the flexibility I once craved and more about avoiding the question of what I actually want to do with my time. He listens while he works, occasionally catching my eye in the mirror when something I say particularly resonates. His responses are thoughtful, never rushed, and he has a way of reflecting my concerns back to me that makes them sound less like failings and more like growing pains worth examining. "You're not stuck," he says one evening while trimming around my ears with surgical precision. "You're just taking your time figuring out where you want to land. But what if I never do? What if I'm destined to keep drifting?" Lionel pauses, comb suspended midair, and meets my eyes in the mirror. "You don't drift in here," he observes quietly. "When you're sitting in this chair, you're the most present person I know." The comment hits me with unexpected force because it's true. These appointments have become the most grounded moments of my week, the only times I'm completely focused on where I am instead of where I think I should be going. The realization makes me understand why I've been manufacturing reasons to come back. It's not just about seeing Lionel, though that's certainly part of it. It's about feeling like myself, feeling real in a way that happens nowhere else. In return, Lionel begins sharing pieces of his own story. How he almost left town after graduating high school, had a scholarship to study business at a state university 3 hours away. But when his uncle offered to teach him the trade, something about learning a craft appealed to him more than the abstract promise of a degree. "I wanted to build something with my hands," he explains while working oil into my scalp during what he calls a conditioning treatment, but what feels more like an excuse to touch me. Something that would last longer than a spreadsheet or a presentation. When his uncle died and left him the shop, Lionel admits he considered selling it and finally taking that delayed path to college. But by then the work had gotten into his blood. The satisfaction of helping people look like the best versions of themselves, the meditative quality of the precise movements, the way regular customers became something approaching family. "This place saved me," he says, and I can hear the gratitude in his voice. "Gave me a reason to stay when everything in me wanted to run." I begin lingering after my appointments, finding small ways to make myself useful. Sweeping the hair from around his station, wiping down the mirrors, organizing his tools with the kind of care I usually reserve for nothing. He doesn't ask for help, but he doesn't discourage it either. Instead, we develop an easy rhythm, moving around each other in the small space with a familiarity that feels domestic and intimate and completely natural. One evening while I'm cleaning the mirrors and he's sterilizing his scissors, I catch him watching me in the reflection. When our eyes meet, he doesn't look away immediately as he used to. The moment stretches between us, loaded with possibility, until a truck rumbles past outside and breaks the spell. But these accumulated moments begin to feel like a conversation we're having without words. Every extended appointment, every invented reason to return, every small task I perform in his space, it's all building toward something neither of us has named, but both of us can feel gathering force between us. The tension becomes almost unbearable on a cold Thursday evening in late November. I'm seated in the chair while Lionel works around my jawline, his touch feather-light as he navigates the sensitive area where my ear meets my neck. The intimacy of it overwhelms me suddenly, not just the physical closeness, but the care he takes, the attention he pays to every detail of his work, the way he treats my body like something worthy of reverence. My pulse quickens under his fingertips, and I know he can feel it. The shop fills with a charged silence that makes my skin feel electric. He's so close I can see the concentration in his eyes, can smell the mint on his breath, can feel the warmth radiating from his body. It's too much. All these weeks of accumulated longing, of careful boundaries, of dancing around what we both know is happening between us. When he finally steps back to assess his work, I'm barely breathing. Our eyes meet in the mirror, and this time the moment doesn't break. It stretches taut between us, filled with everything we haven't said. "I shouldn't have done that first kiss," he whispers, his voice rough with something I can't quite identify. The admission hangs in the air like a confession. In the mirror, I can see the conflict written across his features, desire warring with caution, want fighting against the professional boundaries he spent years maintaining. "Then why do I keep hoping you'll do it again?" The words escape before I can stop them, raw and honest in a way that makes my cheeks burn. And suddenly, all the careful distance we've been maintaining collapses like a house of cards. The confession hangs between us like a bridge neither of us is quite ready to cross. Lionel sets down his scissors with trembling hands, and I watch his reflection as he struggles with something internal, some decision that seems to be tearing him apart from the inside. He doesn't respond to my admission immediately. Instead, he removes the cape from around my shoulders with mechanical precision, shaking it out and hanging it on its hook as if the familiar motions might restore some sense of normalcy to what has become an extraordinary moment. But his hands are unsteady, and the routine feels forced, like an actor who has forgotten his lines but continues moving through the blocking. I stand from the chair on legs that feel disconnected from my body, unsure whether I should leave or stay, whether my honesty has crossed a line that will destroy whatever delicate thing we've been building. The silence stretches between us, filled with the weight of everything we've been dancing around for months. It's nearly 9 o'clock. The street outside has emptied of foot traffic, and the other shops on the block have long since closed their doors. Inside, the warm light from Lionel's vintage fixtures creates an intimate cocoon that feels separate from the rest of the world. We exist in this pocket of time and space where normal rules don't seem to apply, where a barber and his customer have somehow become something else entirely. I should go, I say, though every fiber of my being rebels against the idea. The words feel like a question disguised as a statement, a way of offering him an escape if he needs one. But Lionel doesn't take the offer. Instead, he turns away from his station and leans against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest in a gesture that might look casual if not for the tension visible in every line of his body. "You don't understand," he says, his voice so quiet I have to strain to hear him. "I think about it every time you're here." The admission hits me like a physical force. All those appointments where I thought I was imagining the charged atmosphere, where I convinced myself that the lingering touches and extended conversations were products of wishful thinking. He was feeling it too. The knowledge is both exhilarating and terrifying. "Think about what?" I ask, though I know the answer. I need to hear him say it. His eyes meet mine directly for the first time since my confession. "Kissing you again. Touching you the way I want to instead of the way I'm supposed to." He pauses, runs a hand through his own hair in a gesture of frustration I've never seen from him before. When you're in that chair, it takes everything I have to keep things professional. The raw honesty in his voice undoes something fundamental in my chest. This careful, controlled man who approaches his craft with such precision has been as affected by our connection as I have. The realization makes me bold in a way that surprises us both. I cross the small space between us in 3 steps, stopping just close enough that I can see the conflict playing out in his eyes. Then stop thinking, I tell him, my voice steadier than I feel. For a moment, neither of us moves. We stand facing each other in the warm light of his shop, surrounded by the tools of his trade, balanced on the edge of a decision that will change everything between us. I can see him weighing options, considering consequences, fighting against whatever internal resistance has kept us in this careful dance for so long. Then something in his expression shifts, and he reaches for me. This kiss is nothing like the first one, where that was brief and almost businesslike in its precision. This is slow and deliberate and full of months of accumulated wanting. His hands come up to frame my face with the same careful attention he brings to his work, and I can feel the slight tremor in his fingers that betrays how much this moment means to him. When he kisses me, it's with the thoroughness of someone who has been thinking about exactly this for far longer than I realized. His lips are warm and sure against mine, and I can taste the mint from the gum he was chewing earlier, can smell the familiar scent of the styling products he uses. Everything about the moment feels both surreal and inevitable, like we've been moving toward this since the first time I sat in his chair. The shop falls away around us. The mirrors and vintage fixtures and carefully organized tools become background to this single point of connection. My hands find the front of his shirt, fisting in the soft cotton as if I need something to anchor me to reality. His arms come around me, pulling me closer until there's no space left between us, until I can feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest. When we finally break apart, we're both breathing hard. Lionel rests his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, and I can see him trying to process what just happened. The careful boundaries he's maintained, the professional distance that has defined our relationship, have crumbled completely. I don't know what this is, he whispers, and I can hear the uncertainty in his voice alongside the wonder. Neither do I admit, my hand still gripping his shirt. But it's real. He opens his eyes then, studying my face with the same intensity he brings to his work. But it's real, he agrees, and the acknowledgement feels like another kind of beginning. We stand there in the quiet of his shop, holding each other while the neon sign hums in the window and the world continues its normal rhythm outside. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel completely present, completely here. Not drifting, not planning an escape, not wondering where I should be instead. Just existing in this moment with this man who has somehow become the most important constant in my uncertain life. The silence that follows is deafening. Not just the immediate silence after our kiss, though that stretches long enough to make my heart race with sudden uncertainty, but the deeper silence that settles over the following days, then stretches into a week, then longer. My phone remains conspicuously quiet, devoid of the two words that have punctuated my life with comfortable regularity for over a year. No chair free. No contact at all. I tell myself he needs time to process what happened between us. That crossing the line from professional relationship to something more intimate requires adjustment, recalibration of boundaries that have been firmly established for so long. I construct reasonable explanations for his silence, each one designed to quiet the growing anxiety in my chest. But as the days accumulate without word from him, the explanations begin to feel less convincing. Maybe the kiss was a mistake he regrets. Maybe the reality of what we'd done hit him after I left, and he decided the risk to his business, his reputation, his carefully ordered life was too great. Maybe I misread the intensity of the moment, projected my own feelings onto his actions. By the second week, I'm walking past his shop during my breaks from a bar, telling myself I'm just happening to be in the neighborhood. The lights are on. I can see him moving around inside, working with other customers who occupy the chair I come to think of as mine. Life continues for him, apparently unchanged, while I feel like I'm slowly coming apart at the seams. I consider going in, making up some excuse about needing a trim or want to schedule an appointment. But something holds me back, pride, maybe, or fear of what I might see in his expression. The possibility that he'll look at me like a mistake he needs to undo. Instead, I throw myself into work with an intensity that surprises my coworkers. I pick up extra shifts, stay late to help with inventory, volunteer for the thankless tasks that no one else wants. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to fill the hours that stretch empty without the rhythm of our appointments to look forward to. But distraction only works for so long. In the quiet moments between customers, when I'm wiping down the bar for the third time in an hour, my mind inevitably drifts back to that night. The way Lionel's hands felt against my face. The certainty in his voice when he said it was real. The contradiction between that moment and this silence feels like a puzzle I can't solve. 3 weeks after our kiss, my restraint finally crumbles. I show up at his shop on a Tuesday evening, 15 minutes before closing time, my heart hammering against my ribs as I push through the door. The familiar bell announces my arrival, and Lionel looks up from sweeping the floor around his station. The expression that crosses his face when he sees me is complex, surprise, relief, and something that might be guilt all flickering across his features in rapid succession. He sets the broom aside and straightens, suddenly looking smaller somehow, less assured than the man who had kissed me with such certainty. "Hey," he says, and the simple word carries the weight of everything that has passed between us and everything that hasn't. "Hey yourself," I reply, trying to keep my voice light despite the turmoil in my chest. We stand facing each other across the empty shop, the space feeling vast despite its actual dimensions. The silence stretches between us, filled with questions neither of us seems ready to ask. Finally, Lionel breaks. "I was afraid if I kept calling you back, you'd start expecting more from me," he admits, his voice barely above a whisper. The honesty hits me like a physical blow. Not because it's unexpected, but because it confirms what I've been trying not to acknowledge, that what happened between us scared him enough to retreat completely. "And what if I do?" I ask, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Expect more from you." He looks away, focusing on something beyond my shoulder. "That's what I'm afraid of." The admission hangs between us like a bridge that's partially collapsed, still spanning the distance but no longer safe to cross. I can see the conflict playing out in his posture, the way his hands clench and unclench at his sides. He wants to reach for me, but something is holding him back. "I'm afraid I don't know how to do this," he continues, gesturing vaguely at the space between us. "What we had was simple, safe. And now it's complicated," I finish for him. He nods, finally meeting my eyes again. "I built this place to be something I could control, where I knew the rules and could follow them perfectly. You make me want to throw all of that away, and it terrifies me." The vulnerability in his confession breaks something open in my chest. This careful, methodical man who has created order from chaos in his professional life is being undone by the unpredictability of what we've discovered together. I take a step closer, then another, until I'm close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. Then decide, I tell him, echoing the words I'd spoken before our first real kiss. He looks at me for a long moment, and I can see him weighing possibilities, considering outcomes, trying to find a way to reconcile his need for control with his desire for connection. And Lionel, who has spent his life making careful, measured decisions, who approaches every task with methodical precision, finally does the most impulsive thing I've ever seen him do. He chooses me. 6 weeks later, my phone buzzes with a familiar message. Chair free. But everything about receiving it has changed. Where it once carried the simple promise of a routine appointment, it now arrives weighted with intimacy, with the knowledge of what those 2 words have come to represent between us. Not just an available time slot, but an invitation into something that has grown far beyond the boundaries of a professional relationship. I respond the same way I always have, that I'll be there in 20 minutes, but now the anticipation that fills those 20 minutes is of a different quality entirely. I'm not just walking to get my hair cut. I'm walking toward Lionel, toward the man who chose to let me matter more than his need for control. The bell chimes my arrival, as it always has, but when Lionel looks up from his station, the smile that spreads across his face is unguarded in a way it never was before. There's no careful professional distance, no measured politeness, just genuine pleasure at seeing me, the kind of expression that makes something warm unfurl in my chest. The routine begins, as it always has, but now it's infused with an entirely different energy. When he shakes out the black cape and settles it around my shoulders, his hands linger at my neck for just a moment longer than necessary. When he runs his fingers through my hair to assess what needs to be done, the touch carries an intimacy that makes my breath catch. We've learned to navigate this new territory carefully over the past weeks. The kiss that night opened a door between us that can't be closed, but we've had to figure out how to walk through it without destroying everything else we'd built. It's been a delicate balance, honoring the connection that drew us together while respecting the professional space that remains part of who we are. The conversations during our appointments have deepened further, moving beyond the careful revelations we'd shared before into something approaching true intimacy. He tells me about the loneliness that had settled into his bones before I started coming around, how the shop had begun to feel more like a beautiful cage than a sanctuary. I tell him about the way our connection has changed how I move through the world, how having something to look forward to has made everything else feel more manageable. But it's the silences that have become most meaningful. The comfortable quiet that settles between us while he works. When words feel unnecessary because the understanding passes between us through touch, through shared glances in the mirror, through the simple fact of choosing to be present with each other. Tonight, like many recent nights, I don't leave when the haircut is finished. Instead, I help him close up the shop, turning off lights and organizing tools with the familiarity of someone who belongs here. The domesticity of it still takes my breath away sometimes. The way we move around each other in the small space, the easy coordination that speaks to how well we've learned each other's rhythms. When the last light is switched off except for the soft glow from the street, Lionel turns to face me in the semi-darkness. We stand in the middle of his shop, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the history of all our conversations, all our careful steps toward each other. There's something different in his expression tonight, a resolution that hadn't been there before. He reaches for me without hesitation now, his hands cupping my face with the same precision he brings to his work, but with a tenderness that still has the power to undo me completely. When he kisses me this time, there's no uncertainty, no holding back. It's the kiss of someone who has made peace with his decision, who has stopped fighting against what he wants in favor of what feels safe. His lips move against mine with a confidence that tells me he's done weighing consequences, done measuring risks. The shop falls away around us, as it always does when we come together like this. The mirrors and vintage fixtures become background to this moment of connection that feels both familiar and miraculous. I can taste the mint from his gum, can smell the combination of styling products and his cologne that has become as comforting to me as home. When we break apart, neither of us speaks immediately. We stand forehead to forehead in the quiet space, breathing the same air, existing in this pocket of time that belongs entirely to us. Outside, the world continues its normal rhythm, but in here, everything has shifted into a new configuration. This is what the chair was always waiting for, I realize. Not just a customer to fill the time, but someone who would matter enough to change everything. Someone worth the risk of complication, worth the surrender of control. Lionel pulls back enough to look at me, and I see in his eyes the same recognition I feel in my own chest. We've crossed over into something neither of us fully understands yet, but something we're both willing to explore. The careful boundaries we once maintained have evolved into something more flexible, more honest. For the first time in my life, I'm not drifting. I'm anchored here in this moment, with this man who saw something in me worth keeping before I knew it was there myself. The transience that used to define my existence has given way to something stable, something real. When Lionel smiles at me in the soft light filtering through the window, I understand that this is what home feels like. Not a place, but a person. Not a destination, but a choice to stay, to build something together in the space between heartbeats. The chair wasn't just free. It was waiting.